Welcome back. Let's talk something else now. One of the most discussed issues nationwide this past week has been the Sex for Grade scandal, an undercover investigation released by the BBC to expose how female university students across West Africa are sexually assaulted by male lecturers. The investigation actually covered Nigeria and Ghana, to be precise. At the center of the documentary was Dr. Boniface Igbenegbu, a senior lecturer and former sub-dean at the Faculty of Arts, University of Lagos, who was caught on tape making advances at an undercover journalist who posed as a 17-year-old admission seeker. Igbenegbu, who also pastors a local Pentecostal church, went further to make, and of course made references to the cold room in Unilag Senior Staff Club, where lecturers allegedly harass students sexually. That's female students now. But he wasn't the only one. Another lecturer, Dr. Samuel Oladipo, from the Department of Economics, was also indicted in the viral video. Unilag authorities, of course, have suspended both men pending commencement of administrative inquiry, and Dr. Igbenegbu's church has also barred him from conducting any pastoral duties, at least for now. Amid all the backlash generated by these revelations, there are reports that Dr. Igbenegbu had actually made a futile attempt to take his life, although that has not been confirmed. But we can't rule out the possibilities of that happening. The truth is, we don't want this man dead. He has a family, so he needs to stay alive. And besides, he needs to stay alive to answer for his actions now. So we just have to wait and see how, all of these unfolds. We'll wait and see how it all ends. But joining me now to discuss this is Kenneth Ayemoba, who is an education consultant. Well, thank you very much, Kenneth, for joining us on the program. What exactly was your reaction when you first saw that video? What did you make of it?
My reaction was pretty normal, I guess. At first, anyone who sees it will feel enraged, depending on what your opinion is about that kind of issue. I didn't feel surprised because while BBC Africa exposes it now, it's something we already know has been in existence for a very long time. I have friends who have experienced it before. So when I saw it, I was just like, okay, this is maybe a wake-up call, but I wouldn't say I was shocked because it's something I already know has been happening for a very long time, way longer than anyone actually believes.
Well, quite some disturbing revelations were made in the documentary. I mean, you saw lecturers who are supposed to guide students, assaulting them. Why do you think we're seeing this trend?
Of course, it's not something that is supposed to be. Everyone expects the ideal situation, which should be that when kids are sent to university or they gain admission into university, they are expected to have some form of protection from those who are charged with educating them. If not protection, at least just let them be. But I think it has to do with not just the universities. I think it's something that extends into the society. The university is just a microcosm, it's a precursor, but it's something that happens both in universities and outside universities. But I would say it's more rampant in universities because there is a ready pool of students. It's kind of like a predator-prey relationship. If you have a lion existing in a zoo, it has little or no access to prey. But when it comes to university, if you want to create an analogy, you're looking at a situation where a lion is dropped in a farmhouse, or basically a couple of sheep are dropped in the Serengeti, for example, where you have a lot of lions. So the university presents a situation where prey and predator are brought together in such close proximity that it's so easy for the relationship, which shouldn't be, to start to exist, where the lecturers have direct access to the students, predator having direct access to prey. So that's the difference between what happens in the society and what happens in university. The same thing happens, it's just that it is more rampant in the university because of the close proximity of the predators to the prey.
And if school authorities are aware that this has been going on for a while, shouldn't schools have regulations or guidelines, for instance, warning against this behavior or actions?
I think the schools have guidelines, honestly. It's one thing to have guidelines or rules and regulations. It's another thing to actually implement them. Like I said, the university is like a microcosm of the country. I have this thing I say that, I mean, if the head is sick, every part of the body is going to be sick. With what is happening in the country, it's kind of difficult to imagine that there will be any facet or sector of the country, the economy, facilities, parastatals, that is not infected by the lack of rule of law that permeates through the entire society. You have a situation where rules are there to be broken or at the very least to be ignored. I believe if you reach out to all the universities in question and even all universities that were not visited, they would produce documents upon documents of regulations, rules and regulations that do not allow this kind of thing to happen. But it's one thing to have them on paper. It's another thing to actually implement them. Why has it gone on for as long as it has gone on? It's simple. Nobody cares. The lecturers have the free will to do whatever they want to do. The students don't have a voice. If you speak, you're like one in a million. Most students don't speak up because they don't want to be victimized by speaking up, either by their fellow students or the lecturers. Nobody comes to their aid, so why should anyone speak up? The reason it has gone on this long is because it is largely unchecked. And if I am bold enough to say, I would say you don't fish in shark-infested waters and catch mackerels. You can't do it. The same body, the same governing body responsible for making those rules and regulations and enforcing them, let's not forget, were probably once lecturers as well. And while they were lecturers, they probably engaged in this same heinous acts. So if you have those same people now being in a place of authority and seniority where they are supposed to implement the rules that prevent this type of occurrences, it's expected that they are not going to implement, they are not going to enforce those rules because they are actually guilty of the same offenses.
Now, the fact is that there is an age limit to getting into the university in this country. And of course, I think that's about 16 years. But these days, we see people as young as 15 years old getting into the university. And the thing is, when people are immature and they get admitted into the university, they're likely to get abused by some of these lecturers who, of course, would want to take advantage of, their young age, no doubt at all. And sometimes, some of these young people are very naive. Don't you think part of the problem we have here is that we're just not following the rules? Even parents, too, can be blamed for this.
I believe that some universities actually have that as policy. But like I said before, it's one thing to have it written down in a document, and it's an entirely different thing to implement it. The age limit for universities should not be below 16 at the very least. But these days you have situations where it's a cascade of issues. It's like a chain reaction. You have students who are finishing secondary school a lot faster, most of the time because they are helped along, and parents want to quickly get their children into university. It doesn't matter what age they are. My neighbor's kid has gotten admission into university, so I want my own child to gain admission into university. If my brother's child can gain admission at 15, why should I waste my child's time? I want my child to get into university and graduate on time. You have most graduates these days, some of them come out at the age of 20, which, as far as I'm concerned, is ridiculous. You're a graduate and you're still living with your parents. You have no sense of responsibility. So if you have no sense of responsibility after you have graduated, how possibly could you have had any sense of responsibility while you were in school? Of course, it becomes a lot easier for students in university to be preyed upon by lecturers if they are not yet mature. There's a difference between being academically ready for university and being psychologically and mentally ready for university. In most other countries, for instance, the UK, there is a particular age you're allowed to gain admission into university. If you have not reached that age, you're made to sit at home for 1 year. Unless, of course, you're a prodigy, which means you're a genius. And even most geniuses, if you go on TEDx and YouTube, they are not allowed to live on campus. Where you find students, you hear, oh, he's 12 years old and he's doing his master's, or genius kids. They don't actually live on campus. They live in a home, and the parents have to drive them to school and drive them back home. And that's because while they might be academic geniuses, they are psychologically immature to deal and combat with the menace of the university society and university environment. So, do we have that policy here in most universities? I'm pretty sure we do. Is it being implemented? The answer is a big fat no, because you have kids who finish secondary school at 14, they write their UME at 15, they gain admission at 15, and most of them don't even know how to go about clearance. They don't know how to go about registering for courses. So yeah, it makes it very easy for either senior students or, in this case, lecturers to prey on them. They don't know any better. So yes, there should be an age limit. There should be an implemented and enforced age limit for children who are about to get into university, especially when the university is this type of community where predators are bound. It makes no sense to send in unwilling prey into that kind of environment. So there should be an age limit. That age limit should be enforced to make sure that these kids are getting into school when they have some form of psychological maturity aside from their academic performance.
Well, Mr. Ayimova, I'm just going to ask you to hold your thoughts there. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back to continue the discussion. On DEJI 360, we don't just ask the questions. What is wrong with amending the Constitution the way the National Assembly members have been doing it? We seek answers.
Constitution is constituent. Our problem is not lack of laws. Our problem is lack of the willpower to implement our laws.
Answers that provide clarity.
While we negotiate, we should try to make it a point that the girls must be complete.
The clarity you need to make informed judgment so that you can make the right decision and take action. People are saying it is you politicians that are responsible for this, that you are the reason why this is happening.
All these dollars that call themselves governors in this country. I wish we had people like Tony at the National Assembly. God forbid that I go to join that
DEJI 360, providing clarity to issues. Welcome back. I've been speaking with Kenneth Ayimova, who is an educationist, and we've been talking about the sex for grade scandal. And I still have Kenneth Ayimova with us. Now, Kenneth, speaking of admission, from what we see or saw in that documentary, the lecturer actually promised to give the undercover reporter admission. We all know lecturers are not the ones in charge of admissions. Every institution has an admin office, but over time we've seen this trend of people trying to lobby and cut corners just to secure admissions. Ideally, should this be the case, how is the admission process supposed to work?
Okay, interesting question. Now, once again, like I said, I'll go back to what I said about the university being a part of the country. We have a situation where the same practice permeates through the entire society. Why should university be any different? You said something about ideally. There is the idyllic situation and there is the realistic situation. What we have most of the time is reality. And reality, most of the time, as far as admissions is concerned, let's narrow it down to admissions into higher institutions, goes against what ideally should occur. Simple. Lecturers have no business with admissions. Definitely. You have a process for admission. You write an exam. In this case, you write your UTME, and then you go further to write your post-UTME. You have cutoffs that are set, and for both the UTME and the post-UTME. Now, when you exceed those cutoffs, you're granted admission. The problem is that most of the time, you have slots and quotas set within the university system might be unknown to people outside. But when you have a situation where children who score above the cutoff points in their UTME and above the cutoff points in their post-UTME not gaining admission, you find out that there is a problem. The problem is that the slots are being used by lecturers and other university staff to secure admission for their own persons, for their own purpose, either for exchange of favors or for pecuniary benefits, whatever the case may be. So people are forced to seek admission through non-proper admission channels. And that usually requires you to go to a lecturer you know, or a lecturer your father knows, or a lecturer your mother knows, to help with securing the admission. The difference is that if you do pass your exams, you score above your cutoff marks in your UTME, your post-UTME, what it means is that it might be easier for the lecturer to get you admitted into the university because your case may not be as dire as someone who did not pass at all. But yes, because of the situation that has been created, it has caused lecturers to once more, and university staff, not just lecturers, university staff, to be given the opportunity once again, an avenue to prey on unsuspecting students who are seeking admission. The same thing happens if you have to get a job. Everybody calls it legwork these days. Now, in ideal society, legwork simply means you do what you need to do. You do what you have to do. If you know that you are required to have a certain qualification to get a job, you bend your back to get that qualification. That's legwork. If you want to register a business, go through the regular process, that's legwork. But these days, in real society, not ideal society, in real society, legwork now means what you do that is aside from what you should normally do to get what you should get. Whether or not you deserve it, we now live in a society where mediocrity has replaced meritocracy, where people who merit things don't get them because mediocrity causes the people who do not deserve those things to get them. Is it a terrible thing? Of course it is. Can we combat it? Yes, as much as we can combat corruption in Nigeria. It's an everyday fight. It's an everyday fight. Lecturers are given quotas. They're given slots. There's something called the VC's list. There is something called supplementary list. There is the UTME list, which you make. Now, if you notice something very, like when I went into university, I'll use myself as an example. I was on the UTME list, which is the list that is published because you passed your UTME in flying colors. We were about 12 on that list. I still remember clearly we were about 12. I was number 5 on that list. But when you look at the supplementary list, they are in the hundreds. So it confuses me as to whether only 12 people scored above the cutoff point, and yet so many other people are being granted admission into university. Now, if the UTME list is for those people who scored above the cutoff point, who are the other people in the supplementary list and the other lists that keep coming out? Because most of the time when you go to university and you've talked to a lecturer, you keep going back and he keeps telling you, don't worry, there's one more list coming out. Don't worry, there's one more. Don't worry, there's one more list coming out. Because it's a lobby process. Every lecturer is lobbying, and the lecturer you even meet determines whether your admission is going to be successful or not. Because lecturers have ranks. And in the rank and file system, a senior lecturer has more slots and will definitely have his slots filled before a junior lecturer. Back then in University of Benin, even secretaries had their own slots. And we realized then in Uniben that secretaries were also pretty powerful because a secretary could actually switch up a name on the list for admission. So you had some people who didn't even meet the lecturers. They used to go to the secretaries of those lecturers, the secretary of the dean, because you know they are the ones that type the final list. Whatever list the dean gives to them, the dean arranges the list, or the lecturer arranges the list in order of priority. So the names that come first are actually the ones that have priority. So if the dean has 10 names on his list, it doesn't cost the secretary anything to remove the 9th name and replace it with somebody else's name. Once the admission list has come out, the admission list has come out. You can't change it. That's what happens in today's society. It should not happen, but that's what we have today. And it's something that definitely needs to be looked into.
So what should we be looking at as measures now to address this problem?
What should we be looking at as measures to address this? It's a huge problem. It's corruption. So if you say, what are we looking at as measures to address this, it's kind of difficult to answer because the university is just a part of the problem. I'll go back to what I said before. It's kind of like the head being sick, having a disease, and the arm begins to have lesions. Now, those lesions that are appearing on the arm are because of the sickness in the head. Now, you can treat the lesions, but they're just going to keep coming back because the head is still diseased. The head is the sickness in the head is what caused the symptoms of lesions on the hand. The lesions themselves are not an ailment. So you have a situation where if you want to solve the problem, you have to first of all start solving it from outside the university before you work your way into the university. It's a Herculean task, there's no doubt about it, but until we are ready to actually do that, all we're going to have is stop gaps. That's all we're going to keep having, stop gaps. You can set up a committee as we usually do, set up a commission as we usually do to look into it. They'll plug a few leaks, but there's actually a chasm that needs to be closed. And until that chasm is filled up, those leaks you have plugged will only bring temporary recourse to the problem. The problem is mindsets, the mindsets of the lecturers, the mindsets of even the students coming in, because most students have even lost faith in the admission process. You have children who score high points still telling their parents, we still need to go see lecturers because last year my friend's older brother passed all his cutoffs and he still needed to see a lecturer. We need to start altering mindsets. We need to go out of university and start from outside university. That's a whole different story. I could talk about universities today and we will not leave here today because of what the university, community tertiary institutions are doing to the fabric of education in the nation as it stands today. We're trying to get it right in the elementary schools and in the secondary schools, but most of the time all the efforts are undone in the tertiary institutions. You find it easier to curb corruption and deal with this type of issues in the secondary schools than you do in universities, because universities are almost like cities of their own, with the VC almost being the mayor of the city or the governor of the city. We have little or no say in what goes on there.
And the suspension of the lecturers in question, you don't think it will serve as a deterrent?
I think the suspension is another stopgap, if you ask me. It's another stopgap. You have a situation where a student reports a lecturer and there is no evidence, no phone evidence, no video evidence, and the lecturer is suspended. And you have a situation where a lecturer is reported with video evidence or audio evidence, and you still do the same thing, you suspend the lecturer. I have a personal experience. I went to the University of Lagos, and there were lecturers that we knew who did all these things. I won't mention any names, but one of them was actually caught. His own was even worse because he was doing it with a married woman. He was trying to sexually harass a married woman, and he was only suspended for a month. The problem is simple. If the people in authority are guilty of the same crimes, it's difficult to punish someone who actually does it, simply because that person knows your secrets. I mean, if I am a judge, for example, and I'm a cocaine dealer, or I buy cocaine, and you bring a cocaine dealer who is my dealer into my courtroom, it's going to be pretty difficult for me to sentence him the way I should sentence him, because I'm also guilty of the same crime. I'm afraid that he's going to out me if he doesn't like the type of the sentences I give or the way the court proceeding goes. So yeah, suspending him is just one thing. What do you do after that? Or do we find ourselves in a kind of situation in Nigeria where this will be the trend for a couple of weeks, and then another major story will come up and this will be completely forgotten. Let's not forget there was the case of the OAU lecturer who was recorded by the students actually clearly stating what he wanted, how many times he wanted sex, and for what grades. He was at first suspended. It was pressure and the insurmountable evidence that led to him being fired from the job. And I think he was even given the opportunity of resigning. So the suspension is a stopgap. It's the first step. What do you do after that? I believe that consequence must always equal action. Reaction must always equal action. If the consequence for an offense is not equal or greater than the offense, there is no deterrent factor for that offense. The consequence must be so grave that the perpetrator will think twice before carrying out the offense. But that is not the situation that we see today. It is not at all, and it's a very, very sad situation. If I could talk about, it's a very simple example is in a school, secondary school, some of the schools where I consult. You give a teacher a memo for flouting the rules. One memo, second memo, third memo. You find out that there's now a pattern. The teacher just keeps collecting the queries or the memos or the warning letters because he or she knows that that's all it's going to be. But by the time you introduce a pecuniary sanction, where for carrying out this offense or for getting 2 memos or 2 warnings, you get a 20% deduction in your pay for that month, or a 30% deduction, or a 10% deduction in your pay, it causes a deterrent because that consequence is a consequence that is felt dearly by the perpetrator. Until you have consequence that equals or surpasses offense, there will be no deterrence.
Kenneth Ayemoba, thank you very much for joining us on the program and for sharing your thoughts with us on this very important issue. Well, that's it on the program, but if you want to watch it again, it's very simple. Go to our website, tv360nigeria.com. You'll find this program and lots more there. You can also follow the conversation on our various social media platforms. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.